Hey, Podcast Aquanauts. Who's up for a trip? Well, I mean, not a real one. We can't actually afford to send all of you. But today, let's talk about travel. Travel, especially international travel, is one of those things that, if you're fortunate enough to do it, can be an eye-opening experience. Really, it can't help but be. Immersion in another culture can act as a kind of mirror, showing us a new view of ourselves, the rest of the world, and in some cases, it'll give us new perspectives about the animals that are around the world as well. For today's episode, I brought in 3 of my coworkers who have embarked on some truly amazing journeys. I mean, seriously, expect to have your wanderlust at fever pitch and your jealousy stoked after you're done with this episode. Whether these trips were for their own enjoyment or as part of their roles here at the aquarium, all 3 left a huge impact on the people who undertook them. So, grab your passport, pack your bags, and let's start the podcast. Thom Benson, you are our Vice President and Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, or have I got that twisted around?
No, that's fine. Yep.
All right. And then Elaine Robinson is our Senior Aquarist.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then to my left, we've got Claudia Mendez-Marti. Claudia, you're one of our community outreach educators.
Mm-hmm. And I coordinate a little bit of the volunteers in the education department.
And I should probably introduce myself as well, I guess, since I'm terrible about doing that. But I'm Casey Phillips, the communication specialist here at the Tennessee Aquarium, host of the Podcast Aquatic, and for today only, your tour guide on this figurative trip around the world upon which we are about to embark. We're going to go to a lot of different places. You might be surprised by some of the adventures that these staff members and guests have been on. I'm definitely interested to hear more about them. But before we start that discussion, I would like to start with a quote by the inimitable author and satirist Mark Twain. He said about travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Words of wisdom from America's sage.
Yeah, it gave me goosebumps.
It's true. I think all of the things that he said resonate really strongly with me. Traveling exposes us to new cultures, to new languages, new foods, new viewpoints, new music. And, you know, as Twain suggests, I think those kinds of experiences can't help but literally broaden our horizons. What are your takes about the importance of traveling to the experience of just living one's life?
You know, I think that Twain was exactly right. One of the things that struck me about being in Costa Rica a year ago was seeing people who live very modest lives compared to what the average American does. But everybody there was just very happy. You know, there were people that were riding bicycles 2, and in some cases 3. They'd have a child in a basket on the front. They would have somebody riding behind them. We happened to be passing through a small town a school was letting out. And you pass by these homes that, you know, have tin roofs and doors that are open because there's no air conditioning, all the creature comforts that we take for granted here. And yet these people were, at least visually, very, very happy individuals. And it sort of struck me as like, of all the little things that I complain about in my daily life, it sort of refocused me and to think about, wow, you can be happy without a lot of material things.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely offers a new perspective to kind of see how other people live, for sure. Elaine, what are your thoughts about what Twain wrote?
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely a wonderful experience to be able to see how other people live. I traveled down to the Amazon, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was just how accessible everything was with boat, and nobody really had cars or anything like that. There were very few cars. Mostly traveled through boat and very, very modest boats too. So that was very interesting as well. And just kind of the same as Thom, very meager lives, but very happy people as well.
We'll get into the details of each of these 3 adventures, but Claudia, what are your thoughts about what traveling does for you?
Every time I travel, but this time especially, it was very humbling and very eye-opening. Like Thom was saying, it's very interesting how much the cultures, you know, like how much we really have in common and people don't even notice. When it comes down, we're all people, so we're all needing the same things. And seeing those people just so happy and so welcoming, really. It felt so welcoming every time I would go anywhere. It really felt that I was home in a way. It was really beautiful to be there.
We had someone here in Chattanooga who has a travel show. And she said, if you're doing it right, you're connecting with the people that you're visiting. You're really spending time getting to know them and not just visiting the destination.
Yeah, there are a lot of people, I think, who go places like to Jamaica or the Caribbean. And if that's your international experience, that's great. But I think it behooves you to leave the hotel, to actually go out and explore the towns. And, there obviously there are things to worry about security-wise, and you have to do it in a smart way. But what you're seeing on a resort is probably not reflective of the day-to-day experience of the people in the countries that you're a guest of.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So I love statistics because I think numbers lend authority to things. And I wanted to know what percentage of us have actually gone, left the borders of the United States to see another country. And the Pew Research Center did a study, fortunately last year, so it was pretty recent data, that said that I was fully prepared to find out that Americans were just a bunch of stubborn homebodies who, that is, I think, a common perception of Americans, that why would we go somewhere else when America is so great? And America is great, but I do think that travel, as we've talked about already, is a valuable experience if you're fortunate enough to do it. But as it turns out, there actually are a significant percentage of us who have been abroad. So I want to guess, actually, or I want like you to guess, what percentage of Americans do you think, and Tom, you can't do this because we've already talked about this. But Claudia and Elaine, what percentage of people in America do you think have left the country to visit at least one other nation?
I am going to be hopeful and say 40%.
Okay.
I'm going to go with 60%.
Well, I am glad to tell both of you that neither one of you was being optimistic enough.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I know. So as it turns out, 76% of Americans have been to at least one other country. Now, that could be just going north to Vancouver or Toronto in Canada. It could be going down to Mexico City. It could be going to one of those resorts that I mentioned in the Bahamas or somewhere else in the Caribbean. But the point is they've left America and they've entered another country, which I was very very heartened by. Now, the research breaks it down a little bit further from not just people who've gone to other countries, but specifically people who've gone to 5 or more countries, which they consider a globetrotter, or that's how they define them. So what percentage of Americans do you think are globetrotters? I'll tell you, the number obviously is smaller, but what percentage of Americans do you think have?
I'm going to say it's roughly half.
Okay.
Half of the percentage that travel abroad.
Okay.
I'm going to go with 30%.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say 40.
Okay. Well, you're all close. About a quarter of Americans have gone to 5 or more countries. So 26% of Americans have gone to at least 5 countries, which I think is pretty great. And half of us who responded to, or half of the people who responded to the poll, 50% have gone to at least one, 26% have gone to 5 or more. So that adds up to 76. That's the math. No more math for today, I don't think.
I was much better at geography than math.
And then there are the 23% of people who are considered non-travelers, but they're non-travelers who, many of whom said they would love to travel if given the opportunity. And I think that's worth discussing too, because there are a lot of economics to consider. Mm. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about? Do you think that if things were easier, that more people would travel abroad?
I think so, but I also recognize that there are opportunities for people to travel internationally through their church. There are a lot of churches that do mission trips to various countries, and they have very rich experiences because they are so embedded in the community that they're helping to build schools or work on infrastructure. And so, there's probably ways that people can get to foreign lands without going through the expense of a 4-star hotel.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent point. Elaine, what do you think? Do you think more people would go if they were able to?
I do think more people would if they were able to, and I'm certainly not a globetrotter. I have only been to 2 other countries. And so, but it was much later in life that I was able to do that as well. So, but now I've kind of got the bug. I want to do it more. Yeah.
And Claudia, I'm assuming you share Tom's thoughts.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm lucky enough to have studied abroad, and thank God I've been experienced, and maybe I'm a globetrotter, but I feel the same way. Yeah, I think definitely people would enjoy. Yeah.
Elaine just went ahead of me, but I was going to ask how many countries the rest of you have been to. But while you're thinking about that and tallying it up, and I can already see that Claudia literally is tallying it up, a significant percentage of Americans have traveled abroad, as we've discussed. But if we want to catch up to the rest of the world in being globetrotters, we got a little ways to go. So the top 5 countries whose residents have been to at least 5 countries included Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Australia, and France. And all those were between 54 and 88%. Sweden would be the most at 88%, and then Australia and France both had 54. And if you think about it, it makes a little bit of sense that and Tom Stoney said, why do you think that those countries in particular have such a high percentage of globetrotters?
Well, having relatives that live in Europe, it's easy to jump on a train and in an hour,
bingo.
You might be in 2 or 3 different countries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true. So, and again, the economics of it are a little bit different for us than they are for a lot of other places. I know from my experiences traveling abroad, I've been to, I think I counted 8 countries last night, or it will be 8 by the time this actually goes live. I will have just gotten back from Japan, so that'll be my 8th country. And on a lot of these trips, I see a lot of Australians. So it was not surprising to me to find out that Australians are a heavily traveled people, because the 2 things that I know about them that from my personal experience, it's all anecdotal, but the reason that they travel so much is that they are by and large given a lot of time off every year. And once they leave, the economics for them are just as bad as they are for us, but they just don't come back. Not for a while. So they go on trips that are kind of
walkabout.
Yeah, exactly. They go on a tour, and that tour doesn't just mean one country. Japan is just leg 1 that might include, a trip to Bali, a trip to Thailand, a trip to Morocco, and then they might come home for a little bit and do some laundry, then go out again. So it's just it's jealousy inducing, and I wish that that were true for Americans as well. But they definitely travel a lot in Australia, which is a little surprising until you realize that once they get out, it makes more sense to keep traveling. So, Claudia, have you tallied up how many countries you have been to?
7.
7. Okay.
Yeah.
Tom?
6.
Okay, so we've got 3 globetrotters and 1 newly fledged traveler who wants to do more.
Yes.
So let's talk about the meat of this conversation, which is the travels that you've had and what those experiences did. We've already talked about them changing your perspective and your worldview. But Claudia, tell us about the trip that you did earlier this year to Africa. Why were you there, and what did you do?
So I actually went with my family. It's been my dream since I'm 5 years old, literally. Like, I've been telling my dad that I've been wanting to go to that trip forever. So they kind of surprised me, telling me last year that I was going to go. And I actually went with my dad, my big sister, her husband, her 2 kids, and my dad was my roommate, which I loved because I got to spoil him. Anyway, so it was an amazing trip. I think the best, obviously, having family time is always an amazing thing, but being so immersed into the culture, like we went to like the Masai Mara tribe, so we were literally in a tribe. Like, it was like very moving. And I think again the thing that I enjoyed the most was that they were so excited. Didn't matter who I met, they were so excited for us to be there and happy for us to be there. And they were, because I started asking that because I've seen in other countries that they're not as happy. So it kind of like struck me. So I started talking about them. Like, the only way we can actually bring more people is people having an amazing experience here and feeling like they're home. And it really clicked for me. So we went to Kenya first. We went to the Loisaba Conservation. It was very eye-opening because there are a lot of things over there that you wouldn't think they would do, but their way of actually being eco-friendly is way more advanced than we are.
In what sense?
So I'll tell you really quick, like even the water, they had all bottled waters with glass and they would refill them every day instead of having plastic one use. Just even the way they would cook, it was everything grown there. So even like just that farm to table feeling. I have a couple of things, like even they had solar power So they would tell us, okay, at this certain time is better for you. So even little things like that you would think they would be implemented in our culture are not, and they were completely implemented over there. They had the reducing plastic. You couldn't even bring a plastic bag over there. Like, you could not at all. It even said it in all the information that I got ahead of time. So little things like that were very eye-opening to me, very like moving, that these people are really invested in their animals, and making sure that not just people are, that we're all really taking care of the environment fully in like the whole sense of it.
So a lot of people, when they go to Africa, they go on safari. There are those experiences, and there's nothing. I'm no way downplaying how amazing that experience must be, but why did you opt to take the approach that you did of going and doing those things, as opposed to going on the safari and staying on the hotel where you can have a giraffe greet you in the morning?
Yeah. So we did go to safari, definitely. We went to safari, and we did stay in camps. I think, like, obviously the places we chose were very more into conservation. My dad chose those places because of that. And also the way they give back to the community. They give a lot of, like, they actually build schools. They actually have a water filtration system that we were able to donate to a school. So even little things like that you feel you made an impact in that country in the positive, was very moving to me. I get like so emotional, because it was really like one of those things that you're like, wow, like I'm actually helping a little bit here. But obviously the safaris, the big thing over there. We would take cars, and every morning we would do what is called a game drive. Really around 6 a.m, we would head out, and we would come back around 8:30 and 9, and then have breakfast. But those are the best times, because that's when all the lions are getting up, all the animals are actually starting to hunt. So those were the moments that we were able to actually caught animals hunting in the moment, like live.
Yeah, so you were kind enough to share some of the videos that you filmed while you were over there. You saw some wow moments.
I did.
So give us a list of the 2 or 3 experiences that you would consider kind of bucket list moments for you in terms of the wildlife encounters.
So we did see 2 live kills, and that was, I still get chills. It was so amazing. We saw a cheetah mom teaching her baby cheetah how to hunt a gazelle. So just that interaction in itself was amazing. And then I have the video from the beginning, her stalking, and then her slowly moving, and you could see her baby following her. And then all of a sudden, I had a feeling that it was gonna happen. So I pressed play. Then all of a sudden you see the cheetah running out. And then it was so amazing, because it all stayed in the same area. So I was able to get the entire thing on video. The cheetah started running the mom. The baby ran behind her, and they were both tag teaming and actually got the gazelle together. It was such an amazing moment. I know it's sad, but I did have to watch a lot of videos before going to Africa, like a lot of kills, just to desensitize myself, because I'm very animal loving. So, but that moment, I remember for like the next hour, we were so excited, and like the excitement in our bodies, and just like the adrenaline was like pumping through our bodies. It was very, very life-changing.
Okay, so that was one experience.
Yeah.
Do you have any other ones?
The other one, yeah. So we caught when we went to Tanzania, we got the Great Migration crossing, the wildebeest crossed the Masai River. And I've seen it in video, but there were a whole bunch of them, and then one of the younger ones got stuck behind. And you could hear some noise that they was not happy, and then all of a sudden you could see 4 crocs heading to the wildebeest, and they took him down and everything, and I caught that whole thing on video too. So it was like 2 live kills, and then 4 after kills. So we got in the morning, there were a couple of times that we would go, and then they had just hunted a zebra, and they were in the middle of eating it. So I have pictures of lionesses eating with their babies next to it. I also saw another after kill that another cheetah had caught. We saw 5 cheetahs. Like, that was a lot. Like, that's not normal. So yeah, we saw a lot. And that cheetah left the area because there were circlings. The vultures were circling. So the first thing that after the cheetah left, an eagle landed, and then the vultures came. And then after the vultures came, the storks came. So you could see all the cycle of one after the other. And then we didn't stay long enough, but I imagine the hyenas were coming next and taking care of the bones. And, but just seeing that circle of life, that every little bit of that animal was used for the good of the whole. It was just amazing to see, really.
So do you feel like your dad made the right choice? And where to go and what to do?
Yeah, definitely. And it was really cool because I was like, there were like 6 seats and I was like right next to the driver and our guide. And I was always asking questions like, like the weird questions. So
it's the educator.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I couldn't help myself. But it was really cool because my family saw that passion in me and they saw how excited and they got to learn even more because I got to ask those questions. So they were really excited and just seeing me in my, my passion. So it was really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. You also had the experience of being hunted. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Okay. So we actually, one of the reservations had what we call a dog poaching unit or an animal poaching unit. And they actually train dogs to hit the scent of whoever's poaching. And so we met them. We did the whole thing at the beginning. It was amazing. It's actually part of the tribe. So a couple of them were part of the tribe. So me and my 2 nephews decided to be the hunted. And then we each took our foot, actually our shoe, in the sand and scraped it down, both of us. And then we didn't know which one the dog was gonna smell and come get us. So apparently he hit on mine. And I also have a video of me hiding, hunking down in the grass and the dog like coming and pushing me back. So it was even really, really cool to see the dog like immediately, like he got to me. He's like, it's you. So it was really cool to see how well organized and even they go beyond just the simple conservation. They have units that actually take care of these animals and make sure that they're conserved in the right way.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it was great.
All right, you guys have a lot to live up to.
Well, I thought she was going to say that at some point one of the cheetahs stalked them in the Jeep, because that's where I thought this story was going.
I don't know which would be more interesting. I think being hunted by a Maasai warrior is pretty cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah, we did get a couple of like an elephant and a lioness really close to the car that the guys were like, I don't know how they're getting that close. They must feel really safe. So that was like, oh my God, like, wow. Yeah, it was really cool.
Elaine, do you want to tell us about? You've already mentioned your trip to the Amazon, and that's what I'd like to talk about. So, where did you go? What were you doing, and why were you there?
Well, I was fortunate enough to receive an award here at the Aquarium to fund a trip to the Amazon with a group called Project Piaba. And they are a nonprofit organization who they are all about protecting and promoting the wild-caught aquarium fisheries down in the Rio Negro area. So we were on a boat for approximately 2 weeks, starting in Manaus, and hopped on the boat there and went several hundred miles upstream to the town of Barcelos, and even a little bit further to a little village called Darajuá. Just along the whole way, stopping and snorkeling and seeing what kind of fish and other wildlife existed in the area, meeting with the fisher folks who actually do the fishing of the aquarium fish. So it was pretty spectacular.
So you were in the Rio Negro, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so for those of us who maybe are a little less versed in this than you are, what is the Rio Negro and what's its relationship to the Amazon?
Oh, the Rio Negro is a tributary that runs into the Amazon. So it flows from the north down into the Amazon, and just right there, it meets the Amazon at the city of Manaus.
Okay, so is this where the famous meeting of the waters happens?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so explain what that is.
That is where the very acidic waters of the Rio Negro meet the not quite so acidic waters of the Amazon River. Just two totally different colors of water, so you can really see where those two rivers come together and flow side by side, almost completely separately before they do mix. And it's a difference between the pHs and the temperatures, and also the flows.
I always think it looks like coffee art.
Yes.
It just looks like a distinct line. It's almost like you could just draw, if someone drew a line and then in the water, it would look almost like that.
Yes.
You know, there's actually one of those very close here in the region. If you go to Google Maps and look at the satellite imagery of where the Tennessee River enters the Ohio near Paducah, Kentucky, the Tennessee River is a lot cleaner than the Ohio River, and there's a distinct line there too.
So what was it like to see that in person?
It was very cool. And of course, we were on the boat, so we were perched right on top of it, and just amazing to see the churning and the current that were right there at that meeting spot as well.
So while you were there, you said you were investigating the wild-caught fisheries. What was that experience like, and what exactly, when you say you were kind of working with them and understanding what they do, what did you learn?
Let's see. It was just really fascinating to see how they catch the fish in just a very, very gentle way. And then the holding pens that they hold the fish in at various destinations down the river as they travel downriver. And also just fascinating to see what these fish go through, how long the process is of travel for them, and how long it takes for them to get from Daraqua all the way down to Manaus, where they go to the export facilities.
So Elaine, when you say they were collected gently, what does that mean exactly?
They had a very large net, and they would use their canoe paddle to sort of herd the fish into the large net with paddle. So they weren't actually doing a whole lot of capturing with small nets, and even when they moved them from one location to another, they would scoop them up with a little bucket or a bowl, a lot more gentle to have them in that with water so that their skin and slime coat aren't getting damaged.
And so you mentioned snorkeling, and for those of you who've never been here at the aquarium, we do actually dive the exhibits. What was it like to snorkel down the Rio Negro?
I would say it was definitely a different kind of experience, just because just seeing them in their natural environment, seeing them interact with each other, and all the different sizes of fish that were just living peacefully together that I would never put together in an aquarium. You could have your little cichlids and little tetras, and then really large wolffish and stingrays, and all of them you would see in the same areas. I think another thing that was really fascinating to see was the amount of current that they were in the streams that we were snorkeling in. A lot of current, and the fish just absolutely loved that.
So what were some of the species you saw?
We did see lots of cardinal tetras and several other tetras. I'm not exactly sure of the species. Bunch of different cichlids, keyhole cichlids, and checkerboard cichlids. We saw some stingrays, some freshwater rays. We saw an electric eel, leporinus, pink-tailed chalceus, and we did see some piranha, and it was a lot. It was a lot of cool fish.
Piranha, and yet here you are with your skin fully
Yes, I am.
So, spoiler, if you didn't know this, piranha are another one of those animals. We do a lot of good work here at the Podcast Aquatic to de-villainize a lot of animals that are often targeted unfairly as being, quote, bad animals. But piranha are definitely one of those ones, I think, Elaine, that it's fair to say are misunderstood.
I would say they're definitely misunderstood.
So was the fish nerd in you just ecstatic to see these animals in the wild environment?
Yes, totally. And like I said, just seeing the natural behaviors too. Some of the little cichlids had little burrows that they were back into, and we did see a couple of, I think it was a little catfish that had passed away, and all of the other little fish were picking at it and eating the little bits off of it. So it was just really neat to see their natural behaviors.
So did you have any kind of animals you wanted to see, and did you get to check those off your list?
I really wanted to see discus, but I was not able to see them. That was one of the things that I really wanted to see, but we were not able to locate any discus. But I would say probably the most interesting thing was seeing the electric eel. And it wasn't a great view of it because it was kind of tucked up in the roots on the bank of the river, but just really cool to see that in the wild.
So you, as you alluded to earlier, you got to make this trip, go on this adventure, and that was through a professional development grant here at the aquarium. Why did you want to do this initially? What was the end goal for you?
Really interested in Project Piaba and just what they are promoting with the wild caught fisheries. The idea is that if the fisher people are able to make a living off of collecting the wild caught fish, which is completely sustainable, that they will also protect the environment that the fish live in. And so that's kind of where it started, but also just the idea of seeing the animals in the wild and hoping that I can better care for them, knowing how they do live in the wild.
Well, Thom, I think we're going to having explored Africa and the Amazon, I think we can go a little bit farther south. So I love this story because you've gotten to do some really cool things in your career, both here and before the aquarium. And I love to hear those stories, but the one that always inspires the greatest jealousy in me is definitely the trip that you got to make to Antarctica. So when did you go? Why were you there? And what did you see while you were there?
Yeah, this was in 2011, and it was an aquarium trip. But the cruise line has enrichment lectures during the travel. So there's Antarctic historians, there's marine mammal experts, there's a photographer who tells you how to dial in your camera which is essentially a black and white world. It's very different there than in South America, for example. And they always have a meteorologist on board. And so I had the good fortune of meeting a geologist in Texas years prior to this trip, Charles Pissell, who was on Admiral Byrd's third expedition to Antarctica. And Charles was tasked with collecting rock samples and mapping the geology of Antarctica. But during the winter night, he and Paul Seipel developed a formula for protecting troops in extreme temperatures, which we know today as the wind chill index. And so it was a neat storyline because one of the places that we visited on the cruise was the Palmer Long-Term Ecological Research Station, which is located on the Antarctic Peninsula. And this is where scientists are studying climate change. So it was a climate change cruise. So it was fun for me to be able to share some of the pictures that I had permission from Charles's widow to show of his life at an Antarctic research station. And then all of us had the opportunity to go on shore and visit that research station as part of it. And similar to what Claudia's experience was, a portion of the proceeds from the cruise went to support the purchase of scientific equipment for the researchers at Palmer to continue their work studying climate change in one of the places that is warming and changing the fastest on the planet.
Antarctica is a place that is wrapped up in mystery. It just seems as, all the places that the three of you have gone, I think people would consider extremely exotic, but something about Antarctica feels almost otherworldly. So I just want to know what was going through your head the first time you saw the Antarctic Peninsula come over the horizon. What was that moment like?
Well, even before then, to get to Antarctica is a 2-day cruise from Ushuaia, which is Fin del Mundo, the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's the very tip of Argentina. And so it's one of two things. It's either what they call Drake Lake, which is very calm seas, or it is a tempest. The weather down there is extreme. And
I
so,
was going to ask about this because this is intense.
So from, the meteorological perspective, I was very excited. But the very first thing that really took your breath away was they had it was just a fun thing, but everybody put in the date and time of when we would see our first iceberg. And so, the captains knew approximately when that was. And so when we went up topside to look for that first iceberg and through this fog and mist off on the horizon, here's this huge block of ice. And I'm talking about something that if you took the Tennessee Aquarium's height, but extended it 2 city blocks, you've got a chunk of ice that's in the water that is absolutely massive. And, those pieces of ice weren't as blue as some of the smaller ones, but the color of the ice and even the smaller ones, you could stand on the rail and the smaller ones were kind of hissing and popping as they were melting in the seawater. So there's just this overwhelming sense of otherworldness because the air is much cleaner and more crisp there. They even encouraged us as we were leaving South America to look around and notice the color, notice the smell of the land and the plants, because there are no plants, very little. There's, I think, maybe 24 species of plants and lichen that are actually on the Antarctic Peninsula. So it is a very different place. And the other thing that I think was very stunning, and they also encouraged us to do this, was to find a rock somewhere and just sit down and listen. Because one of the things that has been written about in Outside Magazine and other publications is the loss of soundscape. And even if you are in a national forest and you think you're out in the middle of nowhere, if you sit down and listen, you'll hear distant traffic or you'll hear the jet flying overhead. Yeah. There are very few places, and I've been fortunate to be two. One was at the Arctic Circle in Alaska. Same thing. If you put your back to the pipeline and look out over the tundra, it is basically unchanged since time began. And Antarctica was the other one. We were very close to the Antarctic Circle there. And just the absence of human sound and, sort of the unspoiled landscape and the wildlife was just stunning.
I had a weirdly similar experience in a very different, well, I say very different. It was a desert of a different kind on the border of Algeria and Morocco. I'm trying to remember the name of the place that we camped in. Mertsuga, I think, was the name of the place. And standing on the top of a sand dune, looking out over the Sahara towards Algeria, which was some many miles away. And we were already miles out into the desert. You're right. There's for me at least, it was a very humbling experience to be in the middle of that kind of a soundscape, because it made me feel very small.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So in addition to being a weather nerd, we've established that that you are a former meteorologist who never could quite let it go. You're also a bird nerd. So when you're down there, there are obviously penguins, which we are very fortunate to have here at the aquarium, Gentoo and macaroni penguins. So talk about what it was like to see penguins in their home.
Again, crossing the Drake Passage was something that was fantastic for me, because as a kid, one of the museums we went to had a lot of, what we probably all call stuffed animals. They were the taxidermied species that were on display, and they had an albatross that hung from the ceiling. And I was always just amazed at these pelagic birds that had these wingspans that were impressive, that spent almost their entire lives not touching land. The tremendous thousands and literally tens of thousands of miles that they travel in an average year. And to see them for the very first time was just stunning. And the way that their bodies are so perfectly built for gliding and taking advantage of every little air current to stay aloft was fantastic. The number of whale species that we saw, the orcas, getting close enough where you could smell the breath of humpback whales as they were grazing on the tons of krill that was in the water, seeing a leopard seal chasing Adelie penguins and watching them pop out of the water. And fortunately, I was unlike Claudia. I wasn't cheering for the leopard seal. I know he's got to eat too, but I was also cheering for the little penguins who were, just really all over the place, just trying to get out of the way. And then having the experience of having a Gentoo penguin basically sit on your boot and look up at you was amazing, especially because we had just recently opened the Penguins Rock exhibit. And I saw my opportunity as twofold. One, I took a lot of camera and video gear because I felt like this was an opportunity to virtually take people to Antarctica, share with them the pictures and sort of the sounds and the sights that I was privileged enough to have, and show them that the birds here at the Tennessee Aquarium behave exactly the same here as they do in Antarctica. And the colonial penguins, there would be these vast islands, and yet their colonies were on these little small patches, and everybody was shoulder to shoulder because that's how they live. And so sometimes we have people that don't understand the colonial nature of these birds, and they say, oh, those penguins, they don't have enough room. And when in fact, we've got a lot of room for even more penguins than we have. And that's just that's their nature. If you built a 40,000 square foot warehouse, guess what? they would all be in one part of that warehouse living together, because that's what they do on these giant islands. So it was very gratifying to me to know that these birds are getting expert care here at the aquarium, and they're thriving here and doing everything that they do on the beaches in Antarctica.
The thing that I think is the through thread for the experiences the three of you have had, despite them being so different in terms of your travel, is, the importance of seeing these animals in their wild spaces. Aquariums and zoos exist because there is something to be said about the power of seeing an animal face to face. And I can't help but think that that has to be amplified even further when you're seeing an animal, not just face to face, but face to face in its wild home. And any opportunity to travel that gives you the chance to do that has got to be something that inevitably is life-altering if you love animals as much as all of us do.
Yeah, well, I would suggest for the four of us, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think that my first experiences were at Shedd Aquarium in Chicago and the Brookfield Zoo, and those were very meaningful experiences because I have yet to go to Africa. It is on my bucket list, but to see those animals and to experience them up close, and what a wonderful opportunity for, the vast majority of humans that aren't going to have an opportunity to travel to Antarctica to come to downtown Chattanooga and see these birds behaving just like they would on the Antarctic Peninsula. And so zoos and aquariums have probably a bigger role today than they did in the past because our wild spaces are being developed. The places that I stomped around and, caught fish and frogs and turtles in are built over now. There's subdivisions there. And the world has changed where kids can't run around and be in the wild all the time. So we have a really unique opportunity to connect people to nature in a very meaningful way and inspire travel, and that can be to your state park. It can be to your national park that's close to you, going up to the Smokies or going to some of the state parks around Chattanooga, just exploring nature with kids and teaching them about all the wonderful creatures that we have here. But if you have the opportunity to go farther, those experiences can be magnified because you also immerse yourself in the culture as well.
To experience profound culture shock at least once in your life and to feel completely out of place, it sounds like a bad thing. And if you've never had that experience, it probably does seem that way, but it's a thrill, or at least it has been for me. Every time that I have a chance to do that, and I'm sure that Japan, looking forward to my own personal experience, is going to be a complete culture shock again. But I'm really excited at the prospect of re-experiencing that sense of feeling entirely out of place. And so with that, I think we can finally land the figurative plane that we've been traveling around the world in and calling into the globetrot that we've been on for the last 40 minutes or so. This has been an exciting discussion, and travel lends itself to the kinds of experiences that make for good stories. My hope, I guess, for all of you out there in the Podcast Aquanaut Corps is that whatever your means may be, that you're able to have an experience outside of this country. As we've been talking about, having the opportunity to visit another culture is one of those things that, whether you realize it in the moment or not, has an oftentimes profound impact on you. It's not just that it's a fun experience, and they often are fun experiences. Sometimes they're really bad experiences, or they might seem that way in the moment. I'm a fairly firm believer that there are no such things as bad experiences, just stories in the making, and travel is rife with stories in the making. Some of my favorite stories have come from my experiences getting to go abroad and explore places like Marrakesh and the North Island of New Zealand. And my hope is that those of you who are listening to this have the opportunity to go abroad and have your own experiences and have your own stories to tell, because it enriches your life in ways that you probably don't realize in the moment, but will stick with you for the rest of your life. If you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email at podcast@tnaqua.org. They're not here anymore. They have disembarked, so to speak. But my thanks go out again to Thom Benson, Claudia Mendez-Marti, and Elaine Robinson for taking the time out of their busy, busy schedules to travel with us around the world and share their experiences from their international adventures. Until next time, keep listening, and remember, every drop matters.